My name's Graf. My day job is at Wiley, and I volunteer at COPE, where I am the co-vice chair, a position I share with a wonderful colleague called Jerry Pearson, under Ginny Barber's chairship, I suppose. And I'm now going to do a substantive edit. Instead of this being a kind of review article, I'm going to, on the fly, turn it into a letter to the editor so that we remain super concise. I'm not going to skimp on the beginning, which is a bit about COPE, and I'm not going to skimp on the end. I'm going to sort of fly through the middle bit. But before I start, I'd like to know whose organization supports COPE through membership. That's pretty cool. I think that might be about a quarter of the room. So for you, the first bit is going to be a reminder about what COPE is. For the rest of us, perhaps it's going to be an introduction. So, what is COPE for? This is a picture of a grindstone. Sometimes people think COPE is a place to bring their grievance so that they can sharpen their axe before they go off and chop somebody's head off with it. Yeah, that might be a role for COPE. It's not how COPE thinks about itself, though. COPE is a membership organization. It's a charity, a non-profit. It has a little bit over 10,000 members, one full-time employee, an annual operating income of about £200,000. With that enormous number of members and with those very limited resources, we do a lot. So we run a forum 3 times a year where a crew of 60 or 70 editors, peers, turn up online and listen to another editor who's got a problem and help that editor to solve it. All of those cases are then placed into our case archive. There are more than 530 cases in anonymous form in the COPE archive with the feedback from that forum of 60 or 70 editors and with follow-up notes on how the case eventually was resolved. Okay? And it's by doing things like this that COPE tries to operate at the kind of scale that our enterprise, the research and scholarly enterprise, really needs. It's by crowdsourcing, I suppose, advice. It's by sharing that advice, and it's by creating some of the other resources that I'll talk about right now that I think now, after the conversations about infrastructure and plumbing yesterday, that I think are part of the scholarly plumbing. Goodness me, I didn't know COPE contributed to our infrastructure, but I think we have. So we have 16 flowcharts in 6 different languages. Flowcharts help editors it's a decision tree, to work their way through the steps that you need to follow when you're dealing with a tricky case. We have the 530 cases, more than 530. We have 2 codes of conduct, one for publishers and one for journal editors. And I bet soon that we address institutions in a similar way. We have 10 different sets of guidelines dealing with specific parts of the job that we do, from peer review through to dealing with institutions. And we help to advance debate by creating a place for discussion to happen and documenting that. So right now we have 19 different discussion documents that are the result of discussion amongst our membership that crystallize a debate. They might not solve a debate, but they start on the solution to a debate. 19 different documents, including on things like fake peer reviewers and so on. So, COPE's part of the plumbing. That's pretty cool. But we do that with £200,000 worth of operating income a year and 1 full-time employee. So I would like to thank all of those of us who are present who contribute funds to support COPE, and sincerely thank you for that. It helps us to do a great job with very limited resources. Okay, so that's the front end, and now I'm getting into the middle bit that I'll fly through really quickly. How bad are things? I'm not going to dwell on this, it's quite miserable, but there's numerous high-profile instances of research fraud that hit the headlines in the Times on either side of the Atlantic, and that reflect inappropriate behavior, certainly from the research community. This is a case that was a paper that was published in behavioral research, some social sciences work, published in Science November last November 2014, retracted May 2015 because Lecour made it all up. So you've got high-profile headlines. You've also got studies that demonstrate that, misconduct is common and more common than reported. This is a paper by Grant Steen and colleagues. You should check it out. He reviews the literature. The biggest study that he talks about is a meta-analysis of 21 other studies covering the behaviors of 11,600 scientists, suggesting that 2% of all researchers conduct fraud at some time in their career. Read it. How many graphs have we seen like this over the last 48 hours? Many, right? This is the number of retractions increasing extremely rapidly when compared with the same sort of the rate of change in journal articles published. I've redrawn that to make Grant Steen's much more data-intensive chart a little bit easier to show you. Even so, the number of retractions that we are publishing is not reflective of the amount of problem that we're seeing. This is Richard Horton, a quote when he reported from a Wellcome Trust symposium a few months ago around reliability and reproducibility, saying that much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue. So is science self-correcting? Well, it might be, but probably not quickly enough. So that's all the bad stuff. That's the stuff that we have a shared responsibility to address. I don't think we can do it alone, and that's my closing point, but we do have a shared responsibility to try and do something about it. What about the good stuff? Because there is lots of good stuff that's going on. There are new standards, replication standards, reproducibility standards that journals are incorporating into their workflows, that publishers are encouraging people to adopt. The equator standards, the consort standards, and so on, that Catriona, you referred to earlier. They're familiar to those of us who work in medicine, but in the life sciences there's the TOPS standards, that stands for Transparency and Openness Promotion Guidelines, which are kind of new and provide a really nice framework to demonstrate where you are on the spectrum of transparency and therefore reliability. So check out this podcast, I suppose, this SlideShare thing from William Jacoby, and again in a social sciences journal, albeit in a quantitative kind of social sciences journal, about how they're doing replication work at his journal, the American Journal of Political Science. It's a wily thing, but it's open to everybody. So we're doing good stuff. We're also finding out and trying to address the root causes of the problem. So if you haven't heard of the Nuffield Council report on the culture of scientific research in the UK, published a little over a year ago, then I strongly recommend that you go and check it out. This was a rather lengthy exercise to try and influence the shape of the research assessment, research evaluation and excellence framework in the UK before the new framework was published, and talks about the drivers of misbehavior. So we're getting to grips with some of the pressures that we can then go and address. And there's also great stuff happening from researchers. We should applaud this. This is a story that maybe, Richard, you're quite familiar with. It was reported on the Nature Jobs blog about Pamela Ronald, who's a crop scientist at University of California, Davis. She studies rice. And she noticed when her lab couldn't reproduce the work that they'd published in, I think, in Nature, that there was a big problem. And kind of panicked, not because of her reputation, but because of the reputation of the people in her lab. And then undertook an enormous investigation to figure out what the heck went wrong, was very open and transparent about the process that they undertook with the editors of the journals, found that there were problems with the rice that she was using and with the assay that she was using, and then published a retraction. Yeah, that's pretty good. In fact, it's great. It's exemplary behavior. But she went one step further. She went and held a series of public meetings to explain what was wrong and to try and communicate about the great work that she was doing to correct the mistakes that she'd published previously. And we need to applaud work like that. Okay? We need to make retraction not a punishment, but simply a part of doing science. It's inevitable that we'll make mistakes. Pamela Ronald showed us how to correct those. So, summary for us all: we should follow codes when they're out there. We should adopt new codes where they seem to make good sense. We should empower our people. We should employ teams to look after the integrity of the work that we publish. Therefore, that means resources and money. We need to recognize problems and address the causes as well as the symptoms. And the last point is super important. We do need to work together. We need to join in, participate, events like this, work with others. We need to collaborate. And wherever possible, we need to take a lead. I'll close with this quote from Ginny Barber, the current chair of COPE, and a great person. She says, "We need a culture of responsibility for the integrity of the literature. It's not just the job of editors." I put that in because you could substitute editors for publishers, or for funders, or for institutions. And I'll close with a bit of image manipulation. So if you went to IKEA/IKEA, I don't know how to say it, and bought a stool with one leg, you wouldn't expect it to work. You need a stool with 4 legs. If publishers are one of the legs in this fixing this problem, then another leg is editors, another leg is funders, and maybe the stool's got, I don't really know, more than 4 legs. So we do need to work together. Some of the discussions that we had yesterday around collaboration, how actually pretty good we are at that in the publishing world, make me feel good about getting the right number of legs on the stool and playing nice together. We really need to do that. And I have a question for you all, which maybe we can address through the panel. What role should COPE play with the stool? And the metaphor doesn't work anymore. What role should COPE play in trying to bring this collaboration together and make it happen? And that's where I'll close. Thank you.